is let me go to your Schoology page. And I updated it this morning. So I understand you maybe didn't have a chance to read it, and that's my fault for not doing it on Sunday, but here it is today. Um, I do not have you in class tomorrow, but I will see you right now, and then I'll see you on Wednesday and Thursday, and then not on Friday. Um, we will have a little quiz on Thursday with whatever we get through today, and on Wednesday, and then we will finish what we can the next couple of days. So we will have a quiz on Thursday with whatever we get to. And like always, we talk about what the what can be on the quiz. So it's not going to be a gotcha. So if you have any questions, we'll go over that in the next couple of days, like when we're in person, so you know what to expect on this quiz. I'm working on grading your tests. They might be done by Wednesday, but they're for sure not done for tomorrow. So I will get those to you when I can, but this quiz is not reliant on the last test, so I'm not in as big of a rush. If you missed this last test, we'll just need to talk one off to see what I can do to support you to get ready for it, and then when you can take it and make it up. So we can talk about that later. The other thing I want to bring up is the canned food drive is this week. So it's this Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We're collecting in the morning from 7 to 7:40 in the WAC, and everything in red is what we want you to bring in. Remember, with all this pandemic stuff, there's been like a lot of people in need of food and who are homeless, and so it's really important that we get them what they ask for, because it's people who are eating this and who are going hungry, and we need to, do our best to support. And at the bottom, it tells you what your incentive is. You guys are juniors and seniors. You've done this over and over, so you know what to expect. But in case you forgot, these are the things that you need to do in order to get the extra credit. So for 1%, 2%, or 3%. So if you have any specific questions about that, let me know later. But I wanted to make sure you knew that was this week.
Wait,
Wednesday,
I have a question
Thursday.
really fast.
Laura.
Is there a certain day that you have to bring them in, or can you do it on anyone? Because
Any
I'm
one of
going on
those.
a college visit, so
Yep, any one of those 3 days.
okay, perfect.
Yep, great
Thank
question.
you.
You're welcome. If you have any other concerns about that, let me know. But we also will see each other this week too before it's the last chance. So you have time to get those questions answered before that happens. So we're going to jump over to our notes now. And it looks like, let's see.
Are these on
Schoology.
Schoology?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think I was doing these on a funny place. All right, I'm going to just re-download them because I think all mine are on the other weird place, which is not right. So here, if you need them on Schoology too, they are under organized by weeks, and they're in today's notes for week 12. It says homework, or sorry, PC chapter 2 notes PDF, and that has everything. And so we've done some of this already, and then we'll be bouncing around a little bit today. And I know this isn't ideal, but we didn't technically finish 2-1, so I'm not technically assigning that yet. These are things that you can just get started on at a certain time so you don't get like too behind. But I think we've done all of 2-1 except for like the textbook problems, which is what I was hoping to finish today, but I don't have my textbook, so we can't do those. So if you've missed any class, you can watch a video or you can talk to me to get caught up on everything up to this point. And then we're actually going to skip all of 2-2 right now too, because a lot of it's textbook stuff as well. So we're jumping to the 2-3 page. So I apologize for being confusing, but we're going to the 2-3 page, which says 4 at the top. All right, does anyone need help on knowing where we are? Okay. So, and I actually think this is a pretty easy and honestly more fun than some of the other things that we do lesson. We're talking about polynomial functions and we're just graphing them. And what we're starting with is we're going to graph them without having to factor them. But before we do that, we need to remind ourselves of end behavior. So we went over this last unit, but there's 2 types. There's even odd behavior and odd behavior. And then within those 2 types, there's positive and then there's negative. So even odd behavior means that it goes in the same direction no matter which way we go. So I'm going to write same next to even. Even means same. And then odd means opposite. So like one goes high and one goes low, or one goes low and one goes high. So I'm going to write opposite next to that. The positive and the negative just tells me how we end. So if it's an even one, it goes in the same direction and it's positive, they both end up. Since this is end behavior, I don't have anything in the middle. I just do little arrows that go up and up. So it started being high and it ended being high. So it looks something like this. Same direction, but it ends positively. Similar idea if it's negative, but this time it's going to end down. So it's going to have started low and then it's going to end low. Started being low, end being low. Odd means opposite, so they're going to go in opposite ways. So if it's positive, it's going to end high and have started negative. So it started going down and it ends going high. And then if it's negative, it's switched. So it started high and then it ended low. It's important to review these because this is like one of the most important things we're about to use as we graph. The first thing is the zeros is the most important, but then the second thing is this end behavior to know kind of where my arrows start and end. I believe you did this in Algebra 2, and you can look at the calculator, but again, based on my technology, I don't have a calculator to look at today, so we're not going to do that, but I think we can graph this by hand super easily. And remind me if you're like, we've never seen this before, just let me know, but I know when I taught Algebra 2 before I taught this, so I'm sure you've seen this at least a little bit. This is in factored form because it has all the parentheses. Parentheses, 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 parentheses. So this is what we call factored form because it's just factored out. I don't have to physically do any math to solve this problem. No math is needed. Okay. What I can do is easily see my zeros. My zeros here are just if I were to set each of these parentheses equal to 0, equal to 0, equal to 0. I'm not going to make you solve those out because we've done this before. My zeros here are going to be -3, -1, and +2. Is everyone okay on how I did that? Any questions on that? Okay. Make sure you speak up if you do have a question. So these are all my zeros. You guys know this from doing quadratics before. You know what my zeros look like. I'm going to go graph those on my graph. So I'm going to put a point at -3 on the x-axis. I'm going to put a point at -1 on the x-axis and put a point at 2 on the x-axis. That's half the battle. The other half is now my like end behavior stuff. So we're going to label each of these as one of these, even or odd, and then positive or negative. I can tell whether it's even or odd based on how many x's there are. So my x's, and I'm going to erase everything else on this. I have 1, 2, 3 x's. There are no exponents that make us have more x's. I physically see 3, and 3 is an odd number. So this is going to be odd. And then out front tells me if it's positive or negative. There's no sign there, so that means it's positive. So I'm going to call this a positive odd graph, which means that it's starting going low and it's ending going high. And I draw little arrows on my graph. It starts by going low and it ends as I go across the graph going high. The last thing I need to do is just connect all my dots. Since there are no exponents behind my x's or with my parentheses, I'm just going to cross at each of the points. Think of those as little bridges. I can just cross at the bridge, cross at the bridge, cross at the bridge. And then my arrows show that I can go on and on forever.
Wait, can you re-explain how you got positive odd again?
So the odd comes from my x's. So I have 1, 2, 3 x's. They don't have any exponents, so that means I have 3 x's and 3 is odd. So I wrote
Okay.
The positive and the negative comes from what's out in the very front. Since there is no sign out there, we assume that it's positive. So we wrote positive
Okay.
odd. Good question, Ava.
Thank you.
Good question. All right. Can someone tell me, is this something you've seen before or is this brand new? We're not sure. Okay. What was that?
I was just gonna say, like, the positive and the odd, like the even positive and odd, negative and all that is kind of familiar, but the part where you look at the coefficients or the exponents is kind of not as familiar to me, but that might just be a me thing.
Okay, well then I'm going to keep talking like we've never seen this before. If you guys want me to speed up, I'd be happy to, but I'll just keep going slow then. Okay, I'm looking at the next one. I'm on number 2, or letter B, I guess, and we're going to look at my zeros first. So my zeros come from the parentheses, just flip your sign, x equals -3 and +2. And so I'm going to go graph those first. -3 is over here, and +2 is right here. Now for my positive, odd, negative, even, whatever. Let's look out front first. There's nothing there, so I'm going to know that this is positive. Now I'm going to count my x's. I have 1, and then this one right here is raised to the 2nd power. So if I were to distribute that in, it would be x squared. I'd have an x squared and I'd have an x, which would make it 3 x's. It would make it a positive odd. So since this has an exponent of 2, he counts as 2, and then the first one was just a 1, so that's 3. So I've got 3 x's right now. So that makes it positive odd. Any questions on that so far? I know that makes my arrows start low and end high, so I just draw my little arrows out there so I kind of have a roadmap of where I'm going.
Wait, I have a question actually.
Yeah.
When it says, like, I know it says there's 3 x's because of the squared, but they're the same number. Does that still mean that there's 3, even though there's 2 positive 2s?
So there's only one positive 2, and so I'm going to address that in a second. So Grace, you're like, okay, well, there should be 3 zeros then. The square makes that 2 not just be something that we cross out. We're going to bounce at this 2. So we're not going to go all the way across the axis. We're just going to touch it and come back up.
That's what the square does.
Mm-hmm. So,
But it's still odd.
It's still odd. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if you look at how my graph looks, if we just cross like the last one, I'd cross and then I'd cross and then I wouldn't know what to do. The square makes it bounce off of the axis. So I cross at this one, and then at 2, I have to bounce off to keep going up that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. So that's maybe something I'd write off to the side. I'd say like the 2 makes it bounce. The 1 is just a normal cross, which is why I haven't had anything written down. But if you saw above, I just crossed right over each one. And then this one I just crossed as well.
So the exponent 2 and then the exponent 1.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Exponent of 1 makes it just cross, and exponent of 2 makes it bounce off. The next problem has a cube, so we're going to have to talk about that in a second. But let's first identify my 0 and my end behavior. So my 0 here is going to be x equals 2, because I just flipped my sign. For positive or negative, I look out front. Okay, there's nothing there, so we're going to say it's positive. And then because it's x raised to the 3rd power, that means it's odd because it's to the power of 3. There's technically 3 x's there. So we're going to say it's positive odd.
But I thought it was 4 x's because there's 1 in the middle.
This 3 goes with this x. You can think of this as being that exponent. So it's just x to the 3rd, and then there's no other x's. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I said something wrong on the last one then. But this one's positive odd. So that means my 0 is going to be at 2. Let me go put my mark at 2. And positive odd means that I start low and I end high. The only thing we have to do at 3 is make it look like a cubic. So since 3 is cubed, we have to make it look like it's being cubed. So cube doesn't just go straight through like a line. It kind of has like a little like curve as it goes through, or I've called it like a snake as it snakes its way through before. So we have to be a little dramatic with this one to make it look like it's a cube and not just a straight line. So anytime we see a 3, we will go across the x-axis, but we're going to be a little dramatic and make it look cubic as we do so. All right. Any questions
Is
on
this
that?
just the those graphs that we did?
Say again.
Is that just like the graphs we did?
Like our BFF?
Yeah.
Yep, just like our BFF. It all comes
So
full
is the
circle.
other one supposed to look like that too? The squared one?
Well, so you know a square is like a parabola, right? It's U-shaped. So that's
Yeah.
why it's U-shaped right here.
Oh, okay.
It's a little bit flatter than a normal U, but the bounce makes it look like the parabola that it should be. That's a good
Okay.
question, Ava. All right, we're gonna do a couple more like that. Are there any questions you see so far? Sometimes you just have to like do several in order to kind of get all the questions out. So just let me know if you have questions, but we're gonna keep going. We've got 2 more that are still in factored form that'll be easy to solve. And then if you flip the page over and look at C and D and E, we're going to have to factor these in order to do anything. So these are not factored ones that we're going to have to do math before we can do our graphing and identifying. All right, so let's look at A. And who can help me? What are my zeros here? Who can tell me my zeros?
-3, 2, and -1.
Good. -3, 2, and -1. And then what about, is this positive or negative? Anybody can jump in.
Positive.
Positive. Positive. And then how many X's do we have? I see 1, I see 2. Oh, and this one's squared. So 1, 2,
4.
and then squared is 4.
4.
So that makes it even. All right, you guys do a great job with zeros on the positive. The even odd we're working on, so that's why I'm walking us through it. Let's graph our zeros at -3 and at -1 and at 2. Remember that positive even is up in both directions. So I'm drawing my little arrow up here. And then we also remember that the square makes us do something special. So we're bouncing at -1. So I put like a little B next to that. It's the messiest B I've ever written, but it's a little B for bounce. So when I get to -1, I'm going to bounce and stay on the same side of the axis that I was on. Everything else is normal. So I'm going to go from up top, I'm going to cross. Oh, now I'm at -1, so I'm going to bounce and stay low. And then I'm going to cross for the last one. I don't care where these are. I don't care how low or high your little maxes and mins go. All I care is that we cross at the appropriate places and we bounce at the appropriate places and your arrows go in the right direction. Any questions? All right, let's do another one. Flip your paper over or slide on down. We're doing one more like this where we don't have to factor it yet. All right. What are my zeros on letter B? X equals what?
-2, +3.
And then there's
0.
actually one more. This guy is right here as a 0. I heard someone tell me that. Good. So because there's a number out front with a variable, that's 0. So if I were to set like negative 3x equal to 0, then x has to equal 0. That's how I got all my other guys. And so that's how we get that one. So my zeros are at negative 2, 3, and 0. So negative 2, 3, and 0. Now let's do our positive or negative. We look out front. Ooh, there's a negative. So this is a negative one. And then now I got to count my x's. I've got x. Oh, I've got an x squared. So that's 2 x's. I'm up to 3. And I've got an x to the cube, which is 3 more, which gets me to 6. 6 is even. So it's going to be a negative even graph. We doing okay so far?
I'm confused. Can you go over the x again?
Mm-hmm. So we got to count our x's to see how many x's there are. The first one, there's no exponent, so there's just 1. There's 1 right there. The next one has a square with it, so that means I've got 2 more. So I'm up to 3. And then the last one has a cube on it, so that means I've got 1, 2, 3 more, which takes me to 6. Does that help, Lex?
Yes.
Okay, good question. Okay, so I'm going negative even, which means that I'm ending in the same directions. So I'm going to put my arrows facing down because I'm ending in the same directions. Now I have to think about each 0 and do I do something special? At my negative 2, that came from this guy, which was squared. So my negative 2 is going to be a bounce. So I'm going to stay on the negative side of my axis at negative 2. Let me try that again. That's so messy. I'm hitting negative 2 and I'm bouncing to stay down on that side. At 0, that's just a normal negative 3x. There's no exponent there. So I'm just going to cross through like normal. I'm just going to cross through. And then my last one, my positive 3 is a cubic. So I'm going to make it look kind of cubed. So I'm going to, as I go down, I'm going to try and make it as cubic looking as possible. Again, I don't care how high this goes. I don't care how low that goes. I just care that like we have points on that side and we're only doing something near the axis at my zeros. Questions?
Yes. For the x's, so if you have like 6x, that's positive. Like if it's a even number of x's, then it's will end on an even. If it's an odd number of x's, it will end on an odd.
No, if it's an even number of x's, there's an even number of x's up here, and that means that the graph goes in the same direction, either both down or both up. I don't care anything about this.
Or I'm sorry, when I said end on an even, I meant like the second part of that negative, that positive, negative, and then even odd would be even. If that makes sense.
I have no idea what you're saying. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, if like you have like a positive, an even number of x's, your second half of that will be even. Okay, cool beans. Sorry, I asked it all weird.
No, okay. I think we're on the same page, but if we find out that we're not, ask again. Okay. I just didn't quite understand, but we'll recover it if you have a question again. Okay, we're going to do one where we have to factor. So we got to factor this time. It's not already written out nicely with parentheses, so we got to make it have parentheses. This one has 4 parts. We have to factor by grouping. Do you remember factoring by grouping back in Algebra 2? You have to use these first 2 and find a common factor. And then we're going to look at the second 2 and find a common factor. If I do this, the first 2 have a common factor of x squared. So I can take an x squared out of both x to the third and 3x squared, and I'm left with x plus 3. When I look at the second 2 numbers, negative 4x and negative 12, well, their common factor now is negative 4. I can take a negative 4 out of negative 4x and out of negative 12. So that gives me x plus 3. The whole point of this factoring by grouping is that this in parentheses should be the same thing. So I'm able to now combine the numbers up front, x squared minus 4, and have x plus 3 left on the inside. And then last but not least, we're going to factor this because that's a perfect square. X minus 4 becomes x plus 2, x minus 2. And then we have to carry our x plus 3 with us. This is just factoring, which is Algebra 1, Algebra 2 concept. So if you're not following me on this, you're going to have to see me outside of class because I have 2 minutes to finish this up and I want to do all the stuff that we learned today. Once I'm in factored form, I can easily identify my zeros. So I've got x equals -2, x equals +2, and x equals -3. Also, by looking at this form, I know that it's positive because there's no number, there's no negative out front. And then I can count my x's. I have 1, 2, 3 x's. So it's going to be an odd number. Now, you also could look at the original equation, this right here, and look at my leading term. This leading term is positive because there's nothing out front, and it's odd because it's raised to the third power. If you want to look at the unfactored form, you just look at the first term. If we want to look at the factored form, we have to look at everything. Out front, 1, 2, 3. Either way, it will say positive odd. So I know if I come over here and graph at -2, +2, and -3, my graph will go from low to high. And then I just cross at all of my zeros. Cross, 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 cross. Okay. For sake of time, that's all we've got for today. We're going to continue with this tomorrow or next time I see you, and then some of those word problems and the book problems and all that stuff. If you have trouble with factoring, come see me. If you have other questions about this, please come see me too, because I know this will be on your quiz on Friday. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording. Oh, I did record this. Ooh, that's fun.